Everything I knew about myself turned out to be a lie. I found out my real mother by accident, from a comment under an old Facebook photo. I've always been the kind of person who appreciates stability. My life growing up felt like a well-oiled machine. My parents, dad with his steady job, mom always volunteering for bake sales and PTA meetings, they were everything I could have asked for. From the outside, we had it all. A nice house, nice vacations, friends who would always remark how lucky I was to have such perfect parents. But there was always a nagging feeling I couldn't shake, even as a child. It wasn't something I could put into words, but it existed somewhere deep inside me, like a quiet whisper that kept getting louder as I grew older. I remember asking my mom once, when I was around 10 years old, "Why don't we have any pictures of you pregnant?" She had smiled that smile she always did when she thought I was asking something silly and replied, "Oh, I just didn't like taking pictures back then." The conversation ended there, but I was left with an odd sensation of unease. Why wasn't I allowed to see a single picture of her carrying me? Where were the baby books, the ultrasounds, the hospital records? I didn't dwell on it for long. Kids are quick to move on, and the feeling of something being off faded as I grew older. But the oddities kept adding up. There were the missing years, or more accurately, the first few years of my life that didn't seem to exist in any family record. No photos from my early childhood, no documents to show where we'd lived before we moved to our current house when I was about 4. It's strange, isn't it? The things you don't think to question when you're a kid. But looking back, I should have known something wasn't right. When I turned 18, I asked my parents more directly, "How come I don't have any baby pictures? Where's my birth certificate?" They both looked at each other, exchanged a glance that I could only describe as uneasy, before my mom answered, "Oh, sweetheart, you're just our miracle baby. We didn't have the time to worry about such things when we were raising you. Everything happened so quickly, and we just didn't think about it. We're your parents. That's all that matters." That was the end of the conversation, and I never brought it up again. After all, they were my parents. They'd loved me, raised me, and given me everything I could have asked for. Or so I thought. I posted a picture on Facebook one night, a throwback to when I was about 5 years old at the beach with my parents. In the photo, I'm standing in the sand, my tiny hand grasping my dad's finger, while my mom smiles at me with the kind of warmth only a mother can give. It was the epitome of childhood innocence and happiness. The perfect family moment. The comments came flooding in, the usual warm words from family and old friends. But one stood out to me, a comment from someone I didn't recognize. "You look like my sister. She gave her son up for adoption in the 90s. I stared at the words, confusion clouding my mind. What did this mean? Was this some kind of mistake? A bot? A joke? I clicked on the profile of the person who left the comment. Her name was Mara, and her profile was private. But there was a picture of a woman on her page, someone older with dark hair and sharp features. She looked familiar, but I couldn't place her. My heart began to race as I reread the comment. She gave her son up for adoption in the 90s. My mind spun. I had to know more. I wasn't sure why, but something inside me stirred. The strange feeling, the unease, the things I'd always felt were missing. They all came rushing back in that one comment. I sent Mara a message, my fingers trembling as I typed, "Hi, I don't mean to sound rude, but I don't understand what you mean. What's this about someone giving up their son?" It was late, and I didn't expect a reply until morning. But within minutes, she responded. "I'm sorry if I startled you," her message began. "I saw your picture, and you remind me so much of my sister's son. She gave him up for adoption when she was young, back in the 90s. She's always wondered what happened to him. I thought maybe you were him. I just had to ask." My pulse quickened. Was it possible? Could I? Could I be adopted? The very thought was absurd. I'd always believed the story my parents told me, that they'd been my family from the start. But now this woman on Facebook, a stranger, someone I didn't even know, was telling me something entirely different. I typed another message, my mind racing. "I'm not sure what to think about this. Are you saying I was adopted?" There was a long pause before Mara responded. When the reply came, it was brief but chilling in its simplicity. I think you should ask your parents. You were never supposed to know. And with that, everything changed. The next morning, I could hardly bring myself to open my eyes. My head was spinning. I hadn't slept at all, too consumed by what I had learned. I couldn't stop thinking about Mara's comment. You were never supposed to know. The words echoed in my mind, louder and louder as the hours ticked by. I sat in the kitchen, trying to eat something, but my stomach was in knots. My parents were in the living room, acting as if everything was normal. Mom was sipping her coffee, and Dad was reading the newspaper. The calm, predictable routine of a Sunday morning. But inside, everything was different. I was adopted. I had to be. I glanced at my phone, pulling up the message thread with Mara. Her words weighed on me. I needed answers. I needed to know the truth. But how could I confront my parents? After all these years, how could I ask them something so monumental? They had always been there for me, and I never once questioned that. Now everything felt like a lie. I decided I couldn't wait any longer. I had to talk to them. I had to know the truth. I took a deep breath, trying to steady my nerves. The moment I stood up, my mom looked up at me. Something wrong, sweetheart? She asked, her voice soft and warm, as it always had been. I hesitated, unsure how to even begin. Mom, Dad, I need to ask you something, I said, my voice trembling slightly. They both exchanged glances, a subtle shift in their expressions. The casual atmosphere of the morning began to crack. What is it? Dad asked, folding the newspaper and setting it aside. I need to know the truth, I said, my words faltering. Am I adopted? The silence that followed was deafening. Neither of them moved. My heart pounded in my chest as I waited for a response, hoping they would say something, anything to reassure me. But instead, they just stared at me, like I had just spoken in a foreign language. Finally, my mom spoke, her voice calm but somehow distant. What makes you think that? She asked, her eyes avoiding mine. I felt a pang in my chest, a cold sensation spreading through me. A woman on Facebook. She left a comment on a picture I posted. She said I looked like her sister's son, a son she gave up for adoption in the 90s. I swallowed hard, trying to keep my voice steady. She said I was never supposed to know. Mom's face went pale. Dad shifted uncomfortably in his chair. For a long moment, no one said anything. Sweetheart, this is ridiculous, Dad finally said, his voice sharp. What are you trying to say? You were always our son. You know that. But why are there no pictures of Mom pregnant with me? I blurted, unable to hold it back any longer. Why don't I have any documents from my early years? No birth certificate, no hospital records, nothing. I've asked you about this before, and you always brushed it off. Why? Mom's expression darkened, and she exchanged a glance with Dad. She let out a long breath before looking back at me. You don't need to know about that, she said softly, almost pleading. What matters is that we raised you. You're ours. And that's the truth. No, I said, shaking my head. No, it's not. Something isn't right. I can feel it. I need to know. Please. Dad's jaw clenched, his hands tightening into fists. He stood up, his voice rising. You're crazy. Why does it matter? We gave you everything. We loved you. We still love you. This obsession with the past, it's unhealthy. You need to drop it. Why won't you just tell me the truth? I cried, standing up from my seat. Why won't you answer me? Mom's voice softened again, almost pleading. You don't understand. You were too young. You wouldn't have understood then. But you don't need to know. We're your parents, and that's all that matters. It felt like my world was crumbling in front of me. The anger, the confusion, the hurt, it all welled up inside of me. I was staring at the people I had trusted my entire life, the people who had loved me. And now they were refusing to give me answers. It didn't make sense. Why were they hiding the truth? Mom, Dad, please, I whispered. Just tell me what happened. Enough, Dad snapped, his voice sharp, and I flinched. We're not going to talk about this anymore. His words hit me like a slap. My own father, the man who had always been my rock, had just shut me out. And in that moment, I realized something much darker was going on. I didn't know what it was yet, but I could feel it in my bones. Mom and Dad didn't say another word. They turned away from me like I had just become a stranger in my own home. That night, I couldn't sleep. The words they had said replayed in my mind. You don't need to know. We're your parents. It felt like a lifetime of questions were piling up inside me, demanding answers. I couldn't let it go. I had to find out the truth no matter what. And so, in the quiet of the night, I made a decision. I would find my biological mother. I didn't care how difficult it would be. I had to know. I had to find out who I really was. I didn't know where to begin. All I had was a name, Mara, and her vague comment under my childhood photo. You look like my sister. She gave her son up for adoption in the 90s. That sentence had shattered the foundation of everything I thought I knew about myself. But now it was time to stop reeling and start doing something about it. I messaged her again that night. Me. Can we talk? Please. Mara, I wasn't supposed to say anything. Me. I deserve to know the truth. Mara. Her name is Julia. She lives in Oregon. That's all I can tell you. I'm sorry. Julia. It didn't feel like a mother's name. Not to me, not yet. But it was something. A direction, a crack in the wall that had kept the truth sealed for nearly 3 decades. I didn't tell my parents I was leaving. They had made it clear they wouldn't help. Worse, that they didn't want me to know anything. So I packed a bag, took a week off work under the excuse of a family emergency, and booked a ticket to Oregon. I didn't have an address, just a name, and an aching need in my chest. I arrived in Eugene on a foggy Thursday morning. I remember the air being damp and cold, my breath curling like smoke as I stepped off the bus. The city felt unfamiliar and quiet, as if it knew I wasn't supposed to be here. I found a cheap motel and opened my laptop. It didn't take long. Public records, social media, archive property listings. It's scary what you can find with just a little patience and desperation. I found her within 3 hours. Julia Harmon, 49 years old, lived in a modest house on the outskirts of town, worked as a home care nurse. No mention of a son, no photos of children, no trace of me. I stared at her picture for a long time. Her face was narrow with deep-set eyes and a quiet sadness in them. I tilted my head, trying to see myself in her features. Was that my nose? My jawline? The shape of her lips? The more I stared, the more uncomfortable I felt, like I was peering into a mirror that reflected a version of me I had never met. That night I didn't sleep. The next day I drove past her house. 3 times. I couldn't bring myself to stop. The place was small and quiet, a single-story home with white shutters and a garden of dying tulips out front. A wind chime clinked in the breeze. There was an old car in the driveway. Nothing about it looked extraordinary. And yet, it was the origin of everything I never knew. It wasn't until the 4th pass that I parked. I sat in the rental car, gripping the steering wheel, my palms sweating. My heart pounded in my ears. What was I even going to say? Hi, I think you're my real mother? I almost laughed, almost turned around, almost gave up. But then the front door opened. She stepped out slowly, wearing scrubs, her hair pulled back in a loose bun. She looked tired. She walked to her car without noticing me. I opened the door of my own and stepped out. Julia, I said, before I could change my mind. She stopped, turned slowly. Her eyes scanned me, not in a stranger's way, but in the way someone looks at something they've only seen in dreams. Her lips parted. Can I help you? She asked. I swallowed the lump in my throat. My name is Evan, I said. I think you're my mother. Her face drained of color. She stared at me for what felt like an eternity. Then she took one step back. Another. No, she whispered. No, no, no. I just want to talk, I said quickly, holding up my hands. Please, I'm not here to cause problems. I need to know. She turned, opened her car door, and sat down inside. For a moment I thought she would drive away, but she didn't. She sat there. Then finally she looked up at me. You weren't supposed to know, she said. We sat in a nearby park. I let her speak first. She told me her story slowly, hesitantly. Each word felt like it was being pulled from a place she'd buried long ago. She was 19 when she had me. The father? Gone before she could even tell him she was pregnant. Her parents? Furious. Shameful, they called it. Unforgivable. They forced her into silence and into giving me up. I held you once, she whispered, her eyes glazed over. Just once. Then they took you away. She didn't know who adopted me. Didn't want to know, she said. It was too painful. But now you're here, she said, her voice cracking. You look so much like him. I didn't know what to say. I didn't know how to feel. There was a strange warmth in her voice, but also guilt, distance, like she couldn't let herself get too close, like she still believed she didn't deserve to. I sat in silence, watching the wind move through the trees. My throat was tight. I just want to understand, I finally said, why no one ever told me, why I had to find out like this. She shook her head slowly. Because the people who raised you, they loved you. That's all I ever wanted, for you to be loved. I didn't answer, because I wasn't sure anymore if love was the same as truth, or if one could survive without the other. When I left that day, she didn't hug me. I didn't ask for one. But as I walked away, I heard her voice behind me. I'm sorry, Evan, she said, more than you'll ever know. And I believed her, but it didn't make anything easier. Because that night, lying in a strange bed in a strange town, I realized something. I didn't know who I was anymore. Not her son, not theirs. Just a shadow in between. I returned home 2 days later, not because I was ready, but because I didn't know where else to go. The house looked exactly the same as I had left it. The manicured lawn, the white porch swing, the ceramic angel still sitting crooked on the flower bed. It all looked painfully normal, like nothing had changed, but everything had. I didn't go inside right away. I sat in my car staring at the front door, watching the curtains in the living room shift slightly with the breeze. I imagined my mother, the woman who raised me, not Julia, folding laundry in the den or humming along to the radio while she stirred soup in the kitchen. I couldn't shake the sick feeling in my gut, because now every smile, every bedtime story, every whispered "I love you" came with a question mark. Did they mean it, or was it all part of the lie? I finally walked in around sunset. Mom was in the kitchen exactly where I had imagined her. She looked up, surprised, like she hadn't expected me back so soon. Oh, you're home, she said with a smile, wiping her hands on a dish towel. I thought you said next week. I didn't answer. I just stood there watching her. And that's when she saw it. In my eyes. Something different. Something broken. Her smile faded. Evan, she said carefully, what's going on? I took a deep breath. I met her. She didn't ask who. She knew. Her hands dropped the towel. It fell to the floor. Why would you do that? She whispered, her voice trembling. Why would you dig that up? Because I had the right to know, I snapped, sharper than I intended. Because someone left a comment on my Facebook photo telling me my entire life was a lie. That's why. She flinched like I'd slapped her. I didn't want you to find out like that, she said. We were going to tell you someday. When? I said. At my wedding? My funeral? There's no good time for that kind of truth, Mom. But you didn't even try. Dad walked in just then. He took one look at our faces and stopped mid-step. What's going on? I know, I said, turning to him. I know I'm adopted. He closed his eyes, and in that moment, something inside me crumbled. Because the silence that followed wasn't denial. It wasn't confusion. It was confirmation. He sat down slowly, like the weight of the lie had finally crushed him. We never wanted you to feel different, he said. You were ours. From the moment we held you, you were ours. But I wasn't, I said coldly. You borrowed me. You built your life around a secret and hoped I'd never notice. Mom began to cry, but it didn't move me. Not yet. I was still too full of rage. I spent years asking questions, I said. Why there were no photos of you pregnant. Why I didn't have baby clothes from before age 2. Why I don't look like anyone in this family. And every time you changed the subject. Every time you lied. We were scared, Mom whispered. We thought if you knew, you'd leave. You wouldn't see us the same way. I stared at her, tears brimming in my own eyes now. Well, you were right. The next few days were a blur. We avoided each other mostly. Small conversations about groceries or mail or bills, but never that conversation. That one sat in the room like a ghost, haunting every quiet moment. I started sleeping with my door locked. I started dreaming about Julia. Sometimes she would hold me as a baby. Other times she'd just watch me from afar, always with that same regretful expression. And in the dream, I'd scream at her, "Why did you give me away?" But no sound ever came out. Then came the letter. It was a simple white envelope, no return address. Postmarked from Oregon. My name written in elegant cursive across the front. Inside was a note, just a few sentences. Evan, I've thought about you every day for 28 years. I didn't deserve to be your mother, but I never stopped loving you. If you ever want to talk again, I'll be here. No expectations, no pressure, just love. Julia. I sat on my bed for a long time holding that letter. My hands trembled. She said she loved me, but she'd given me up. They said they loved me, but they'd lied. Where did that leave me? I wasn't sure anymore. In the weeks that followed, I avoided everyone. Friends, family. I ignored calls from both my moms, the one who raised me and the one who lost me. I barely spoke at work. I drifted like a ghost through my own life, unsure of which part still belonged to me. Then one afternoon, I walked into the living room. My mom was sitting there alone. No TV, no book, just staring. She looked up at me, her eyes red-rimmed. "I never wanted to hurt you," she said softly. "But maybe I did. Maybe I don't deserve to be your mother anymore." I sat down opposite her, and for the first time in days, I didn't feel angry, just tired. So tired. "I don't know who I am anymore," I said. She reached across the table, hesitated, then took my hand. "You're Evan," she whispered. "You're kind and smart and stubborn as hell. And no matter what name is on your birth certificate, you are still my son." I didn't cry. I couldn't. Not yet. But in that moment, I believed her. I haven't decided what comes next, whether I'll stay, whether I'll leave, whether I'll let Julia into my life or shut that door forever. But I do know this. The truth changes everything. And once you know it, you can never go back. The end, or maybe just the beginning.